So first of all, I would like to ask you to please just check your motivations. Whenever we do something, it's important for us to do it with the best possible motivation. And you all have a good motivation just in terms of coming here, but we have two different types of motivations. There's sort of the causal motivation, which is what gets you to do something initially. And then there's the actual motivation you have at the time you do something, which might change. And so for that reason, please now check your motivation and make sure that you have a pure motivation. Please listen to these teachings this evening with the pure motivation of bodhicitta in order to bring yourself and all sentient beings to the state of lasting happiness.
首先呢，我哋今日嚟到呢度呢，大家就要檢測下自己嘅動機，究竟我哋點解要嚟？咁我哋要用一個好良好嘅動機，就係話我點解我要咁做呢？做咗之後有咩結果呢？所以呢，我哋要發起一個好清淨嘅菩提心，就係為着未來所有有情嘅眾生而嚟聽聞呢個佛法。
And so the Dharma that we have been talking about over the last 4 weeks has been the different types of vows and how do we hold the vows, how do we keep the vows in the context of our daily life in a modern society.
過去呢4個禮拜嚟呢，我哋係講過唔同嘅戒。咁我哋要知道呢，我哋持呢啲戒呢，首先係要對我哋嘅社會起到咩作用。
And so for the first 2 weeks, we talked about the external vows of individual liberation, which are primarily for lay people, the 8 precepts of the fasting vow and the 5 precepts.
第一堂呢，我哋就講過呢個別解脫戒，就係俾我哋在家嘅居士受嘅，咁咪就有呢個8關齋戒同埋5戒。
It also includes the refuge vows.
亦都包括埋呢個皈依戒喺裏邊。
And so at the end of the teaching this evening, there are some people who asked for the 5 precepts, so I'll give the 5 precepts. And in order to take the 5 precepts, you first have to have taken the refuge vow. And so if there is anyone who is taking the 5 precepts and has not yet taken the refuge vow, I will give them the refuge vow first. Or if there are others who would like to take refuge, I will first give the refuge vow.
咁今日呢，講完課完咗呢，上師就會傳呢個5戒。但係大家呢，要受持呢個5戒呢，首先係要受咗皈依戒先。如果未受皈依戒嘅，上師可以先傳皈依戒俾你哋，然後再受5戒。
And so we will do that at the end of this evening's teaching.
咁今日喺講課完咗之後就會傳戒。
Then last week we talked about the Bodhisattva vow. We talked a lot about the things that you should avoid doing in the Bodhisattva vow. We didn't really talk so much about how we actually practice the Bodhisattva vow in our daily lives.
上個禮拜嗰堂呢，亦都講過菩薩戒，基本上講過每一條戒，但係冇講過點樣去修持呢個菩薩戒。
Really what we need to do with the Bodhisattva vow in our daily lives is we need to remember that we have it. We need to think about it all the time. We need to try to have bodhicitta, to remember bodhicitta as frequently as we can. And one way that I find very helpful for myself that is very easy in Hong Kong is when you walk someplace and you see so many people all over the place. You can think, it's because of that person and that person and that person. It's because of all of them that I will achieve enlightenment. And so you can think to yourself with compassion. You can think about their difficulties and sufferings and problems. And think about these as you walk around, because there's so many people whom you see all the time, and it's a wonderful opportunity to practice compassion.
咁呢個菩薩戒呢，大家時常都要記住呢，我哋要發菩提心，時常都要擺自己個心度。咁其實呢，我哋住喺香港呢，亦都係好容易去修持呢個菩提心，因為我行落街呢，已經有好多人喺度。咁我哋亦都可以同自己講，我哋係為着所有佢哋無量個眾生而去行呢個菩薩道。咁我哋亦都可以諗，我哋身邊嘅人究竟佢哋有咩問題呢？有咩艱難呢？同埋佢哋喺度受緊咩苦呢？
The second thing you can do to really train in the Bodhisattva vow is you can do a practice like the 7 points of mind training and Tonglen practice. This is a very popular practice, and if you ever have a chance to take teachings on the 7 points of mind training and can try practicing and doing the Tonglen meditation, then it is very helpful and it is a good way to develop bodhicitta.
首先我哋要去開展我哋嘅菩提心呢，上師話最好呢就修呢個七覺支，同埋都可以修呢個替身法。替身法嘅意思就係話你擺咗你自己喺受緊苦嗰個眾生，而你係代佢受苦，你係要咁諗。
And the third thing you can do is you can take the Bodhisattva vow on your own over and over and over again, as many times as possible. It's good to try to do it every day. I sometimes forget. I have to admit I don't manage to do it every day. But if you can get in a routine where you get up and then recite the Bodhisattva vow and then continue what you're doing, it's really a wonderful way to practice. And so it's in the Kaju Munlam book.
菩薩戒咧，其實我哋係可以自己受嘅，咁就係喺每一日咧，我哋都誦呢個歸依，即係諸佛正法聖言僧開頭嗰個歸依發心文，越做得多就越好。最好就養成一種習慣，就係話每一天起身嘅時候咧，都去念誦。其實呢個歸依發心文咧，亦都喺我哋家諸嘅滿林法本裏邊係有嘅。
Now, the Pratimoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, and the Bodhisattva vows are both vows that come from the Sutra tradition.
咁喺呢個別解脫戒咧，同埋菩薩戒咧，就係嚟自我哋嘅顯性嘅教法。
And so this evening we're primarily going to be talking about the Tantra vows.
今晚咧，我哋主要係講呢個密性嘅戒。
And so the Tantra vows, sometimes they're called the secret vows of the Vidyadhara, the awareness holder.
咁亦都我哋叫做密戒。
And so, what is the difference between these vows from the Sutra tradition and the vows from the Tantra tradition?
喺顯性嘅戒同埋密性嘅戒有咩分別呢？
I think the main difference comes down to the way that you are doing the practice in general. In the Sutra tradition, what we do is we work with the causes. In terms of the vows of individual liberation, we stop doing the things that cause future suffering, and that prevents the result, the suffering, from occurring.
最主要咧就係話兩種戒有咩分別咧？咁其實喺顯性戒咧，我哋從因修起，從呢個別解脫戒，從因修到果。因就係話我哋有咩唔應該做，而避免我哋會墮落，同埋喺輪迴裏邊受苦咧。
In the Bodhisattva vow, we make the commitment to work with bodhicitta. And bodhicitta, as we discussed last week, is the cause of Buddhahood. So we take the Bodhisattva vow, we strengthen our bodhicitta, we build it, and we gradually work building the cause and then performing the practices of the 6 paramitas, which are also causes of the 3 bodies of the Buddha. And so we work with the causes to achieve the result.
基本上咧，顯性嘅戒咧就係從呢個因修到果。咁菩薩戒咧就係話我哋常常都要係用呢個菩提心作為我哋修持嘅行法，從發菩提心直至到我哋成佛為止。咁主要咧就係要修持呢個6度波羅蜜，就係布施、持戒、忍辱、精進、禪定、般若，而最終咧係令我哋可以證到三身，發報化三身。
And so the result is, for the Pratimoksha vows, is the absence of suffering, the freedom from suffering. And the result of the Bodhisattva vows is Buddhahood.
喺別解脫戒咧，嗰個果咧就係話我哋從輪迴中得到解脫，但係菩薩戒嘅果咧就係話最終我哋係成就佛陀嘅果位。
But with Tantra, we don't work so much with the causes. Instead, Tantra is said to be taking the result as the path.
喺密續嚟講咧，我哋就唔係從因修到果，我哋係由倒果修因，係從果開始去修。
And so when we say taking the result as the path, what this means is that actually we are all already Buddhas. We've already awakened to Buddhahood. We have been Buddhas from the very, very beginning. And we just forget about that a little bit. And so because we've forgotten about that, we cycle in samsara. Yet actually, in our essence, we are Buddhas. And so if instead of looking at our impure appearances of this daily life in the world, if instead we look at the pure appearances of our Buddha nature, then that is the primary path of Tantra.
究竟個果係乜嘢呢？其實基本上我哋已經係佛。無始劫以嚟，我哋都係仲係有呢個佛性喺度，但係喺輪迴裏邊咧，我哋係忘記咗我哋本來咧就係有呢個佛性。與其咧去睇我哋不清淨嗰一面咧，我哋會睇我哋清淨嗰一面，因為我哋已經本身已經係有呢個佛性。
When we think about the natures of our own minds, what is really the fundamental nature of our mind like? The nature of our mind, it is emptiness. There's nothing really there when we look for our mind. If you sit in meditation and try to find your mind, you won't find it anywhere. So in this respect, we call it empty, which means there's nothing to find. But even though it's empty, we still know things. We can still feel love. We can still feel compassion. Our mind is also what we call clear at the same time. So our minds are empty and yet clear and knowing.
當我哋睇返我哋自己嘅本性呢，其實究竟最終係睇到空性。咁喺我哋禪修嘅時候呢，其實我哋係揾唔到自己嘅心，亦都冇嘢可以揾。咁其實呢種空性呢，就唔係話代表係乜嘢都冇，但係我哋仍然有一種覺性，我哋仍然係知道有愛、慈悲嘅存在。
And so this is the nature of our minds. This is what our minds have been like from the very beginning. They are empty and clear, empty and knowing. The empty and the knowing are indivisible. You cannot say that there's something that's knowing that is not empty. You cannot say there is something that is empty that is not knowing. They go together. And so this is the nature of our minds. But the nature of the Buddha's mind is not any different from that.
自己本身嘅佛性就係一種空明嘅境界。咁呢種空明嘅境界呢，基本上呢就係睇唔到，係無形嘅。咁但係呢種空性唔代表係乜嘢都冇，而係我哋同佛陀一樣，大家都係有呢種佛性，但係我哋亦都係有一種覺性喺度，亦都認知到周圍係發生緊咩事。
And so because the nature of our mind is the same as the natures of the Buddha's mind, we are Buddhas ourselves. We have a Dharmakaya present within our own minds already there. The only problem is we look outside and see the impure appearances that happen because of all our imprints and habits. But Buddhas do not. They look at the nature and they see the pure nature of all phenomena.
其實我哋嘅心咧，亦都係同佛陀無異無別。咁而我哋亦都係有佛陀嘅法身存在喺我哋裏邊。點解我哋成日都會覺得自己唔係佛呢？因為我哋睇到外在嘅境界係好不清淨，而呢啲不清淨呢，基本上係從我哋無始劫嘅習氣所引起嘅。
And so, if instead of working with the causes, we look inside, just turn our attention inward and look at the nature of our mind, then that is the essence of Vajrayana practice. And when we look at the essence of our mind, then the perceptions of the world are different. So we train ourselves in having what we call pure perception of the world.
與其咧係睇外境點唔清淨，我哋係應該向內求，向內觀翻自己嘅心，而去睇我哋嘅心。其實呢個就係金剛乘嘅精華部分。
So when we meditate in the Vajrayana, it's like when we are doing medicine Buddha practice. When we do medicine Buddha practice, we visualize ourselves as medicine Buddha. We think to ourselves, I actually am the medicine Buddha. This is who I really am. This is what my nature is.
當我哋喺禪修嘅時候，例如我哋係修藥師佛，我哋就要觀想自己係藥師佛。咁其實我哋同藥師佛咧係無異無別嘅。
Now, so sometimes you might think to yourself when you start at the beginning that you're just pretending you're the medicine Buddha. You're pretending the medicine Buddha and that therefore that's going to bring you some benefit. And maybe it will bring you some benefit, but actually you shouldn't just pretend you are the medicine Buddha, because in essence you are the medicine Buddha.
首先一開始嘅時候咧，我哋觀自己係藥師佛，就係話我哋喺度扮緊藥師佛。咁但係其實我哋係唔應該咁諗，其實因為我哋本身嘅體性咧，亦都係同藥師佛咧係無異無別。
And so for that reason, when you see yourself as the medicine Buddha and you picture yourself as the medicine Buddha, then at that point you are looking at yourself and seeing yourself as you truly are. You are not seeing yourself in the impure form that we cling to as being true, but is actually very false.
我哋喺度睇我哋自己係藥師佛，就係話我哋唔係淨係喺度扮藥師佛。其實我哋真正係有佢嘅清淨嘅本性喺裏邊，而唔係我哋自己本身睇到嘅唔清淨嘅本性。
And not only are you the medicine Buddha, actually all other sentient beings also have Buddha nature. They also are all Buddhas as well. And so many of the things that are said in Tantra, like we did the Kunchak-Chidu practice here 4 or 5 nights ago, right? At the end of the Kunchak-Chidu practice, what does it say? It says, view all sentient beings as being the deity. Hear all sounds as being the sounds of the mantra. And hear and think about, and all thoughts become the Dharmakaya. And so this is training yourself in having pure perception.
其實唔單止我哋本身係佛，其實我哋身邊所有嘅人呢，基本上都係佛，因為佢哋亦都有如來嘅本性。咁喺密族嚟講呢，我哋成日都係話我哋要觀想自己係本尊，但唔單止觀想自己係本尊，就算我哋聽到嘅音聲呢，亦都係咒同埋陀羅尼嘅音聲，同埋我哋本身嘅思想同埋覺受呢，亦都係根本就係佛嘅化身。
And so, because the way that Vajrayana practice works is different than the sutra practice, it sometimes seems on the surface like they are somehow contradictory. It can be easy to misunderstand the Tantra practice. Even if you've done a lot of study, there are various different levels that it can be difficult to comprehend what you're doing in the Vajrayana practice.
其實我哋睇呢，密乘呢基本上係同顯乘係唔同。咁好多時呢，我哋會有一個錯誤嘅諗法，就係話我哋唔明白，就係話基本上我哋從金剛乘去修，就係從果修到因，而係從顯乘呢，我哋係從因修到果。
And sometimes it's possible to get a completely wrong idea of it. There's a lot of symbolic language in the Vajrayana. And so sometimes people read the symbolic language and they take it literally, and they get very strange ideas about what the Vajrayana is.
咁好多人呢，亦都有好多錯誤嘅見解，就係由於我哋密乘呢裏邊呢有好多有代表性嘅名相同埋文字，咁好多時我哋就會產生呢個誤會。
Like, for instance, you might read something in a Vajrayana text that says, kill the enemy. And then you wonder, well, what does this mean?
咁有時我哋睇返密乘就係話，我哋要殺咗自己嘅敵人，咁究竟係點解呢？
Well, you have to think about, well, what actually is the enemy?
咁我哋會問，究竟邊個先至係敵人呢？
So is the enemy actually someone out there?
咁係咪呢個敵人就喺我哋身以外嘅外在世界呢？
So actually the enemy is not. The enemy is actually our own clinging to ourselves. So when we say in some Vajrayana practices, kill the enemy, what it means is we have to stop clinging to a self.
我哋真正嘅敵人呢，就係我哋自己嘅我執。
Sometimes it says that you have to tell the biggest lie.
咁有時候話，我哋亦都話，我哋要講最嚴重嘅大話。
So what is the biggest lie you can tell someone?
咁究竟最嚴重嘅大話係同邊個講呢？
The biggest lie you can tell someone is, I am going to liberate you from samsara and bring you to the state of Buddhahood.
最大嘅大話就係話，將你從輪迴中解脫出嚟，而令到你成佛。
And the reason that this is a lie is because they're already Buddhas. How can you bring a Buddha to Buddhahood? They've already got there.
答案就係話，我哋本身已經係佛，點解我哋仲要去成佛呢？
So it is important to remember that in the Vajrayana, we are working with pure perception. People are Buddhas in their nature. In their pure nature, they actually are Buddhas. We just have to help them see through their confusion and to be able to look inside and perceive their Buddha nature as it is.
金剛乘嘅修法就係話，我哋要有一個好純淨、好清淨嘅覺性，就係話我哋要從呢啲迷嘅佛，而令到佢哋成為覺嘅佛。
So we have to remember the essence of all the Dharma is the same. The essence of all the Dharma is not harming anyone.
喺佛法最精華個部分就係話，我哋首先係唔好去傷害任何嘅眾生。
And so just as in the Theravada and in the Mahayana, the essence of the Vajrayana also is to never cause anyone any harm.
從小乘嘅原始佛教到大乘至到金剛乘都係一樣，都係唔可以傷害任何嘅眾生。
So when we do Vajrayana practice, the way we do Vajrayana practice is we go to a guru, we get an empowerment, we get the transmission, we get instructions, and then we start doing the practice.
咁喺金剛乘嘅修法開始嘅時候，就係話我哋要揾一位合資格嘅上師啦，跟住接受佢嘅灌頂，而依照佢嘅開示同埋佢嘅教導去修持呢個佛法。
In the old days, Vajrayana practice used to be very, very secret. A master would give an empowerment to either one disciple or a small group of disciples.
咁喺以前嘅日子咧，金剛乘係一個非常秘密嘅教法，就係話有時灌頂咧，只不過係幫一個人或者係一小部分嘅人灌頂。
In fact, this is how they still do it in the Newar tradition in Nepal. They have one Lama gives the empowerment to one student, often their son.
咁喺尼泊爾咧，而家仍然係咁做。咁好多教法咧，佢哋嘅灌頂咧係傳俾佢哋嘅仔。
But in the Tibetan tradition, we don't do that anymore. In the Tibetan tradition, of course, there are some empowerments that are given in small groups, but many empowerments these days are given in very large groups.
咁喺藏傳佛教嘅傳統咧，就唔係咁樣嘅。通常亦都係有。通常我哋而家可能係幫一小部分嘅人灌頂。
So when Trungpa Rinpoche comes to Hong Kong and gives an empowerment, thousands of people show up. When he goes to Kham, tens of thousands of people show up. When the Dalai Lama goes to Bodh Gaya, 300,000 people showed up and all got cholera. Or something, not cholera necessarily, but they all got sick.
例如創古寧波車嚟香港灌頂咧，都有成過千人嚟灌頂。咁喺康區咧，甚至乎係過萬人。達賴喇嘛去菩提伽耶灌頂咧，甚至乎係有幾萬人。
It's Bodh Gaya's blessing. Actually, not all of them got sick, but quite a few did, but most of them thought it was worth it still.
但係喺呢啲咁大型嘅灌頂咧，好多時都會有好多人病嘅。
In taking the empowerments, when we get the empowerments like this, often people hear, oh, there's an empowerment, and then they just go, and they don't really know what happens when you get an empowerment.
咁喺呢啲情況之下咧，好多時候啲人一聽到咧有灌頂咧，就一窩蜂咁去灌，但係其實佢哋係唔知道究竟係個意義喺邊度。
Especially if you don't speak Tibetan.
尤其是你係唔識藏文，你更加唔知發生咩事。
And so at the beginning of the empowerment, the Lama says, okay, repeat after me, and everyone repeats after the Lama.
咁好多時候喺呢啲咁嘅場合咧，就係話個上司就係話你跟我念啦，咁就個個跟佢念，但係都唔知自己又念緊乜。
Guess what? You just took the refuge vow.
你估下究竟係咩？就係你已經得到皈依戒啦。
And then you and then you recite something else, and what did you just take then? Oh, that was the Bodhisattva vow.
咁跟住你再問自己，又唔知講咗一大輪乜嘢？哦，原來我已經係受咗呢個菩薩戒啦。
And then they go through the empowerment, and they put things on the top of your head, and wave arrows in the air, and do all sorts of things. And at the end, what's happened?
咁好多時候咧，當我哋去到咧接受呢啲咁嘅法器嘅加持啊，可能又有瓶啊，又有個箭啊，諸如此類。但係究竟發生緊咩事咧？
And then someone says to you, now you have samaya commitments, and if you don't keep them, you are going to fall into Vajra hell.
咁咧就會有好多人同你講，嗱，你而家已經得到呢個三昧耶戒啦。如果你唔好好去受持呢個三昧耶戒咧，你就會墮入金剛地獄。
It's actually not that easy to fall into Vajra hell.
要落金剛地獄都唔係咁容易。
You have to, when you take an empowerment, this is when you take the Tantra vows. And so in order to take an empowerment, you first have to have the vow of refuge. You have to develop bodhicitta and take the bodhisattva vow. So there is refuge in bodhicitta that's built into the empowerment, although you first do have to take the refuge vow.
喺呢啲咁嘅密乘戒裏邊咧，首先我哋最基本咧就係第一，我哋已經接受咗皈依戒，同埋第二咧，我哋亦都係接受咗菩薩戒。
Of course, if you haven't yet actually taken the refuge vow as we give it in the Tibetan tradition, you can still go and take the empowerment, of course. You receive the blessings more than the empowerment.
就算我哋係冇受到呢個皈依戒咧，我哋亦都係可以入去灌頂而得到一個加持。
And then during the course of the empowerment, at the beginning of the empowerment, you take the refuge and bodhisattva vows in the empowerment itself. And then during the empowerment, there are various different visualizations you do, various different signs are given to point you out to help you realize the nature of the wisdom.
咁喺呢個灌頂嘅過程咧，其實第一我哋就受咗呢一個皈依戒，第二就係受到呢個菩薩戒。跟住咧，我哋就要觀想呢個我哋自己係本尊，從而觀想個本尊咧，令我哋明白究竟個本性係乜嘢嘢。
And so the question is, how do you actually get the Tantra vows? And so lots of people are afraid. They hear about samaya and the commitments, and they get scared about, oh, I went to the Kala Chakra with 5,000 or 300,000 people, and now I've got a commitment. And so they get scared about it. And so actually quite a few people do come to Rinpoche and ask him, what do I do now? Do I have a commitment?
問題就係話，我究竟有冇得到呢啲咁嘅密乘戒咧？咁例如喺士倫金剛個灌頂裏邊，有幾萬人去灌，根本你自己都唔知發生咩事。咁好多人就驚，喂，究竟我嚟咗灌頂，我究竟係有咩承諾咧？同埋有咩嘢日後應該係要遵守咧？
And what Rinpoche usually replies to these people is that actually the point that you receive the samaya commitments is when you truly receive the empowerment. And truly receiving the empowerment means that it's not just a question of watching a show, it's a question of seeing the symbols and realizing the meaning that they are pointing out. So when you receive an empowerment and you have an experience of the wisdom that the guru is displaying during the empowerment, that is when you are truly receiving the empowerment.
寧波姐亦都開示過，即係喺灌頂嘅時候，我哋係受咗呢個三昧耶戒。首先，我哋要真正去認知到我哋受咗咩戒，而係從灌頂嘅意義係乜嘢呢？同埋佢裏邊有咩代表性呢？咁其實呢啲都係從而得到我哋真正明白我哋基本嘅智慧。
At that point that you truly see the meaning, you receive the tantric vows. In other words, that is when you have the commitments to follow. But not only do you gain the commitments, because you have seen the wisdom, at that point you have the ability to keep the commitments. And so there is no need to worry about whether or not you'll be able to keep them, because when you receive the empowerment and get the commitments, you also gain the ability to keep them.
我哋要真正去睇到究竟灌頂裏邊嘅真正意義，從而先至可以得到呢啲戒。咁究竟我哋亦都有冇咁嘅能力去遵守呢啲咁嘅承諾同埋誓言呢？大家其實係唔需要擔心。當我哋接受咗呢個灌頂嘅時候，我哋亦都會得到加持，從而令到我哋有能力去作出呢個承諾同埋去守呢啲戒。
But most of us don't actually truly perceive the wisdom at that point. Actually, most of us have some sort of feeling, some sort of experience. It could be as minor an experience as, feeling you go through the blessing line at the end and they put the vase on the top of your head and you feel something. Or it could be that you have some feeling that then lasts for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or a few days. But those are all temporary experiences. Those are different than actually realizing the wisdom.
好多人去灌頂就係唔明白究竟灌頂裏邊嘅真正嘅智慧係乜嘢嘢。咁好多時我哋係得到一啲經驗或者有啲感受，當我哋上去接受呢個法器加持，有啲法器擺你頭頂嘅時候，你會有一種感覺，可能呢啲感覺會維持到可能10分鐘，可能維持幾日，但係亦都唔代表你係真正去明白灌頂裏邊嘅真正智慧。
And so at that point, we have an experience of something. We don't have the true empowerment. We haven't truly received it. We haven't truly received the tantric vows. But we have received the blessings of the empowerment.
喺呢啲經驗裏邊呢，其實我哋冇真正係得到一個灌頂，只不過係得到一個加持。
Just because we haven't realized the full wisdom does not mean that the empowerment has not been beneficial, because there is a lot of benefit. It's like the empowerment plants the seed of liberation within us.
咁其實雖然我哋冇確切去體證呢種灌頂裏邊真正嘅智慧，但係其實我哋去到灌頂呢，亦都係對我哋係有一個好好嘅作用。
We call it the empowerment that ripens. And so the empowerment gives you an experience that then gives you more faith and more devotion in the Dharma, more interest in the Dharma, which means that you practice more. Because you practice more, that develops your being and ripens yourself. That is why it is still extremely beneficial to go to an empowerment, even if you do not feel like you developed the true wisdom out of it.
但係其實呢啲灌頂雖然我哋冇真正得到呢種智慧同埋真正得到灌頂，但係亦都將個種子咧種咗落我哋嘅識鐵度。咁喺呢啲灌頂裏邊咧，亦都會幫我哋帶來更多嘅信心，令到我哋咧會更加積極去修行，從而得到更大嘅利益。
If you go to an empowerment and you receive the blessings, you don't actually have the commitments. But I don't think that means that you should then think that the commitments are unimportant.
雖然話我哋去到接受呢啲灌頂，只係得到一個加持，但係唔代表呢啲戒係不存在。
Now, when you go to empowerments, different lamas, different gurus give empowerments in different ways. Trungpa Rinpoche rarely gives any commitments. He rarely says, oh, you need to recite this mantra or do this or that. Other lamas, on the other hand, do. They say, oh, you need to recite this prayer every day. You need to do this number of mantras and so forth.
同嘅上師咧，亦都喺灌頂度有唔同嘅要求。例如創古寧波車咧，就好少要求有咩承諾或者咩戒，或者你每一日要持誦幾多遍咒啊，念幾多遍經文。
And so when the guru gives you a commitment, you should keep it. Usually the gurus Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't generalize. The ones I've been attached, like the Gyalwang Karmapa has given, he gave the Mahakala empowerment in Bodh Gaya this year. He gave a Chenrezig empowerment in Varanasi. And in those two occasions, he gave a commitment. But the commitments were very easy commitments to keep. So you should not necessarily be afraid of having to keep a commitment.
咁但係當上司俾你呢啲咁嘅要你承諾呢啲咁嘅誓言呢，就係話你一定要去遵守。例如就係話大寶法王喺布尼迦耶灌過呢個大黑天嘅灌頂，亦都喺鹿野苑呢係灌過呢個四比觀音嘅灌頂。咁其實呢，大寶法王亦都有承諾要我哋去遵守，但係通常呢啲承諾呢都係好簡單，所以大家係唔需要太擔心。
It's important to keep the commitments because if you don't actually keep a connection with the practice, if you don't actually do something, you won't get any benefit out of it. So when the Gyalwang Karmapa, in giving the Chenrezig empowerment, says, recite the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra every day, you recite the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra every day, because if you don't recite the mantra, then no good is going to come of it.
咁其實最重要呢，都係如果我哋真係受咗呢啲灌頂，我哋就要遵守我哋嘅承諾。如果我哋唔遵守又點呢？就係話你唔會得到乜嘢利益。咁嗱，例如就係話叫你去念 Om Mani Padme Hum，即係6字大明咒，日日都要念。但係你可以唔念，但係你唔會得到任何嘅利益。
There are also other types of commitments, things that you should avoid doing when you have taken an empowerment, when you have the mantra vows. These are what we call like the downfalls of Samaya.
其實呢，亦都有啲其他嘅誓言，就係話，例如一個三昧耶戒，如果我哋唔去遵守呢，咁我哋就係犯咗呢條戒。
One of the first things is that actually you should keep all the vows of the external vows of individual liberation and the Bodhisattva vow. In order to be able to practice mantra, you have to have bodhicitta. If you don't have bodhicitta, it's not going to do any good to mantra practice. So you first have to remember why is it that you're doing mantra practice. And even before that, you have to have good conduct. If you don't have good conduct, it doesn't help. So you have to keep the external vows of individual liberation, such as the 5 precepts. And as the basis for everything, you have to have the refuge vow.
首先，我哋要去持呢啲戒，最基本就係話從呢個別解脫戒開始，從個人開始做起。咁跟住呢，就係呢個菩薩戒。當我哋修持呢個密乘裏邊嘅密咒呢，如果我哋要念呢個密咒而起到作用呢，我哋一定要有菩提心為基本。咁但係呢個5戒其實係乜嘢？就係話我哋要行為良好先，最基本就係話得到呢個皈依戒先。
Now, part of the problem with the tantric vows, and to give a one-evening talk on them, is that actually there are many different tantras and they talk about many different types of commitments. And so, to some degree, the actual commitments of tantra are specific to each individual practice.
所謂嘅密乘戒呢，其實咧喺密續裏邊呢，係有好多唔同嘅誓言。
But there are some basic downfalls that are considered to be common to the basic root downfalls of all Tantra.
一個根本墮戒呢，就係話呢啲咁嘅根本戒呢，喺所有嘅灌頂同埋密續呢，都係要遵守。
And when we look at these, they really come down to a few basic sort of principles. The first of these is that you have to have devotion for your guru.
我哋對我哋嘅上司呢，一定要有虔敬心。
So we have to remember that the Guru is the one who's giving us the Dharma. In the Vajrayana, we talk about the Guru as being equal to the Buddha. We even talk about the Guru as being superior to the Buddha.
我哋係從我哋嘅上司裏邊咧得到呢個佛法，所以我哋咧要視我哋嘅上司咧係同佛咧係無異無別嘅。
The reason we say the Guru is equal to the Buddha is because we receive the Buddha's instructions from the Guru. And so the instructions are the same. So because the instructions the Guru gives us are the same as the instructions the Buddha would give us, the Buddha and the Guru are the same.
咁點解我哋話上司同佛係無異無別咧？因為咧我哋係從我哋嘅上司身上咧係得到呢啲咁嘅指引同埋傳承，所以咧呢啲指引咧最初亦都係喺佛陀嗰度傳出嚟，所以我哋要視我哋嘅上司同佛係無異無別。
And the Guru is even superior to the Buddha because we can't meet the Buddha. The Buddha passed away 2,600 years ago. but we can meet the gurus. And because we can actually meet the gurus, they are kinder to us in particular. Of course, it all comes from the Buddha to begin with, but the guru is for us as individuals even more kind than the Buddha. And so this is the sense in which the guru is even better than the Buddha.
點解我哋話我哋嘅上司係比佛陀更優勝呢？佛陀已經喺2600幾年前圓寂咗，所以我哋冇辦法見到佛陀。咁但係我哋嘅上司呢，我哋係可以見到佢，同埋佢哋對我哋嘅慈悲同埋嘅恩賜，所以好多時我哋都話上司係比佛陀係更優勝。
And so it is important for us to think of our gurus as being Buddhas, to remember that they are Buddhas, that they are giving the instructions, the same Dharma teachings, and taking care of us with the same loving kindness and compassion as the Buddha Shakyamuni would have himself.
所以當我哋諗起我哋嘅上司嘅時候呢，要視佢係同佛無異無別，因為係由呢個上司嘅慈悲同埋佢嘅恩賜而令我哋係得到佛法。
So the first of the 14 root downfalls of the Vajrayana is to disgrace or scorn the master with our body, speech, or mind. So it's to do anything that upsets the master or disgraces the master.
我哋密乘嘅14根本墮呢，第一條戒呢就係詆毀上司，我哋係唔可以從身口意對上司係作出任何唔好嘅對待。
But for it to be really a downfall, you have to really be either extremely angry or extremely greedy or full of great lust. You have to have a really strong negative motivation and then not realize that you've done it, not regret it, and not confess it. If you do it like that, then it's very bad. If you do a kind of minor thing that kind of is bad, if you say something minorly bad about your guru, it's bad, of course, but it is not necessarily going to result in you being born in Vajra hell.
所謂詆毀嘅上司就係話我哋做咗啲非常嚴重嘅行為，例如起咗好大嘅親心啊對上司，或者從佢身上起咗好大嘅貪心啊。如果我哋唔係真係話做咗咁嚴重嘅罪行呢，基本上有時我哋諗啊個上司可能唔係幾好，咁都係唔算犯戒，亦都不至於話要墮入呢個金剛地獄。
Several of the other downfalls involve rejecting Dharma, thinking, oh, the Vajrayana is superior and so Mahayana is bad, the Theravada is bad. If you think like that, that is a mistake. So you should never speak badly of any type of Dharma. You should never think badly of any type of Dharma. All Dharma is good. All Dharma is helpful. And so you should never talk badly of any type of Dharma, Buddhist or non-Buddhist either.
咁第二條戒咧就係叫做唯如來教，就係話我哋唔好批評不同嘅派別，例如係小乘啊、大乘或者密乘。首先，我哋唔係佛教徒，亦都唔可以咁講。
Now, of course, it's true that there are differences in Dharma. And so if you talk in different types of Dharma in different schools, if you talk about the differences in a non-attached way, that's fine. It's when you get angry and really talk badly about other schools and so forth that it is really harmful.
其實個分別就係話，我哋唔可以一個好執着嘅行為去講話，呢間廟唔好，呢間科學院唔好，或者係呢個教派係唔好。
Several of the other downfalls come from seeing people as being impure and getting angry with them. If you keep the pure perception of all sentient beings, if when you look at someone, instead of seeing the exterior of being this sort of person made of flesh and blood, you think of them, this is a Buddha, and see them as being a Buddha, then you won't commit any of the downfalls.
咁第三條戒就係親恨呢個道友。咁首先我哋從外表睇，佢只不過係一個有血有肉嘅人，但係其實我哋咧要睇佢咧係同佛咧都係無異無別嘅。
It's also important to remember that not everyone is really able to practice the Vajrayana. Not everyone's even able to practice the Mahayana. There are a lot of people who are able to practice the Theravada. And so you should not make people feel bad about whatever they're practicing. If there's someone who's practicing the Vajrayana whom you think should not, maybe, you should not tell them, don't practice the Vajrayana. It's not your business. You do your own practice, right? We can only really do our own practice, help other people in their practice, and we should never do anything to discourage anyone.
冇可能每一個人都係修持呢個金剛乘嘅佛法。咁但係首先我哋係唔可以諗，哦，你唔係修持金剛乘嘅佛法，你就係唔好。基於每一個人嘅根器同埋因緣唔同咧，咁有啲人係學小乘嘅，有啲係學大乘嘅，有啲係學密乘嘅。咁你唔可以同佢講話，哦，你唔應該修金剛乘。
And you should also be, when you do the tantric practices, you should be willing to participate, the whole practice, basically. Now, you're not going to be asked to do anything or told to do anything that will violate any of your other vows, although it might seem like that sometimes.
咁我哋亦都唔可以因為咁而令到自己係犯其他嘅戒。
So it's not so difficult to keep the samaya commitments, especially if you remember that it's only really a terrible downfall if you do it out of a very strong negative feeling or negative state of mind.
守呢個三昧耶戒咧，其實都唔係太困難。咁首先我哋係唔好起咗任何好嚴重嘅嗔恨心或者我哋嘅三毒。
Now, I've mentioned, falling into Vajra hell and things like that a couple times, and you might wonder, what am I talking about? How can that possibly work?
咁好多時就話我如果犯咗係要墮金剛地獄，咁究竟我係做咗啲乜嘢呢？同埋點先至會導致我會墮入金剛地獄呢？
And what this really means is that when you do one of these root downfalls, like if you get really angry at your guru and you scorn them or disgrace them or strike your guru, then what you're doing is you're doing a negative act. Because you do a negative act, what's the karmic result of a negative act? It's suffering in the future. And so it's just the same. It's the law of karma, cause and effect. You do negative things, you will experience a negative result. It's not as if there's some sort of magical connection that is different from other types of Buddhism.
三昧耶戒裏邊就係話，如果我哋犯呢個戒，我哋係要對我哋嘅上司咧係起咗好嚴重嘅嗔恨心啊，甚至乎係侮辱佢啊、打佢啊。咁其實從基本上睇，大自然嘅宇宙定律就係因果。當我哋做啲唔好嘅嘢，我哋係一定會得到啲唔好嘅果。
But we also have to remember that benefits avoiding any of the downfalls far outweigh anything else, because the Vajrayana path is the fastest path. When you work with the Mahayana, for example, you're working with the cause. It takes a long time to contemplate, to practice generosity, gather the accumulation of merit, gradually practice discipline, and then eventually finally achieve the first bodhisattva bhumi, and then it takes another 2 interminable kalpas to get to the state of Buddhahood. But with the Vajrayana practice, if you have enough diligence, you can do it in 1 life, or if you lack diligence, maybe 16.
我哋要得到利益就係話，我哋要唔好去犯呢啲戒。第一就係話，大家要明白金剛乘咧，就係一個能夠令我哋一個速成佛道嘅方法。而呢個大乘呢，我哋係需要3個阿僧祇劫，係要行呢個6度萬行呢，最終先至可以成佛。但係金剛乘呢，如果我哋精進呢，我哋可以即生成佛，甚至乎係幾生成佛，至到16世成佛。
So now the question is, we spent the last 4 weeks talking about the Pratimoksha vows, and the Bodhisattva vows, and now tonight a little bit about the Tantra vows. So how do we keep all of these vows together?
喺過去呢4個禮拜裏邊，我哋又講過別解脫戒啊、菩薩戒同埋密乘戒。咁我哋點可以先將所有嘅戒同時遵守呢？
Well, the first thing we need to remember is they're separate vows. The Pratimoksha, the vows of individual liberation, we take now, we take them for the until the end of our life. They're taken with one particular ritual. With the Bodhisattva vow, it's taken from a different type of ritual, and it lasts not for the rest of our life, but from now until enlightenment. And then the mantra vows they're taken in yet another type of ritual, and they last from now until enlightenment as well.
基本上我哋睇返從呢個別解脫戒開始，就係我哋要遵守呢個戒咧，直至到我哋嘅生命終結為止。咁喺呢個菩薩戒咧，亦都係我哋要遵守，直至到我哋去成佛。密乘戒咧，亦都係一樣，我哋要遵守，直至到我哋成佛。
And then you keep the vows as instructed, which means that you've taken vows, you follow the vows. If you've got one of the 5 precepts, you follow that 1 precept. If you have the bodhisattva vow as well, you keep that 1 precept and you keep the bodhisattva vow. If you've also taken empowerment, you keep that 1 precept, the bodhisattva vow, and the empowerments. You keep all of them as you're supposed to do, as you're told to do it.
咁你亦都係要依照你所指示而去受呢啲戒。咁例如別解脫戒裏邊有5條戒，譬如你受咗1條，你就要遵守嗰1條。菩薩戒都係，如果你係受咗1條，亦都係要遵守嗰1條。咁密乘戒亦都係，你能夠受持到幾多，亦都係要去遵守。
But sometimes, actually, there are points where the vows conflict.
咁喺某啲情況之下咧，呢啲戒裏邊咧係有矛盾嘅。
And so what do you do at that point?
咁我哋應該要點做咧
Like you imagine you have the 5 precepts. No alcohol. You go to a Dharma center. They have a feast. They come around bringing the feast at the end. You put out your hand and it's alcohol.
舉個例嚟講就係話呢個五戒就係話唔可以飲酒嘅。咁但係當我哋去接受去到一啲金剛性嘅道場裏邊咧，有時咧你要擺隻手出嚟咧係接受呢個甘露。其實呢啲甘露咧就係酒嚟。
Or imagine that you are the captain, great courage. You are on a boat with 500 arhats, and there is one evil person who is going to sink the boat and kill all of them. And the only way you can stop him is by killing him, which will break your precept of not killing.
舉個例嚟講就係話，你係一隻船嘅船長，咁呢隻船裏邊咧就有500個羅漢喺裏邊，咁亦都有人咧就係想殺咗呢啲羅漢，就係話首先你就要去防止咧，就係要去殺咗呢個人先，咁亦都係犯咗殺戒，喺別解脫戒五戒嚟講。
So when there is a conflict between the vows, the higher vow prevails. The higher vows, the pratimoksha vow is like the foundation, then the bodhisattva vow is like first through the 70th story, and the bodhisattva and the vajrasattva, the vajrayana vow is like the peak of the skyscraper, right? So the higher vow prevails.
當喺呢啲矛盾嘅時候咧，我哋就係以攞最高層次嘅戒律咧，又依照更高層次嘅戒律去做。
And so when you put your hand out at the and they put a little bit of liquor there, drink it.
咁如果我哋係要接受呢啲甘露嘅時候，我哋係飲咗啲酒，我哋就係要去飲。
And you don't need to regret it. You have not broken any vows because you have the higher vow to take for the Vajrayana. It's part of the Vajrayana vows that when a feast is given, you take the feast. Now, this means that when you are there in the puja, you put it out, they put a drop on your hand, you drink that. It doesn't mean that you put, a fifth of Jack Daniels on the shrine and you get it blessed and then you take it home and you drink it all night. That's not what it means. It means that when you are in the feast itself, at that point, you can have some.
基本上咧，我哋係要依止更高層次嘅戒。咁例如我哋去到呢啲金剛性嘅法會，係有啲酒係要飲嘅，其實只不過係幾滴嘅酒，就唔等於話。我擺咗支威士忌喺個壇度，跟住你係成支拎翻屋企飲晒佢。
The other, the example of the bodhisattva, the captain great courage, the evil man, black spearman, was about to sink the boat with 500 arhats, and he would have been cast into the lowest of hells for an innumerable number of lifetimes. And so the bodhisattva killed him at that point. He took an axe and he killed him. This was a bodhisattva action. He did it with a motivation of compassion. And because he did it with a motivation of compassion, according to the Mahayana and the Tibetan teachings, he did not actually break the vow against killing.
咁又講翻頭先個例子就話喺隻船裏邊咧，呢隻船嘅船長，咁係有一個人咧係要將呢啲羅漢咧500個羅漢殺死咗，咁但係你去殺咗佢，你攞把斧頭跟住去殺咗佢，咁係咪犯戒咧？咁係唔代表犯戒，因為你係純粹係出於一個良好嘅動機同埋慈悲心，去令到呢啲羅漢係唔需要被殺害。
Now, this is kind of an extreme example for a couple of reasons. The first is that this was a bodhisattva who was acting completely out of compassion. I think there are sometimes we hear a lot of Tibetan teachers bring this up. This is one of the most famous, frequently given examples about it. And it's as if, okay, if you think you're acting out of compassion, then it's okay to murder someone. Well, you have to be very careful here because you have to actually truly be acting out of compassion and not out of ignorance. So it's important to be really clear on what you are acting out of. And for us ordinary individuals, it is very difficult to engage in such an act out true compassion without any element of hatred at all. So you have to be very careful and very honest with yourself when you are in situations like this.
頭先只不過一個好極端嘅例子。咁其實一個菩薩就係話佢做乜嘢嘢咧，首先都係以呢個慈悲心同埋菩提心為基礎，而唔係出自佢哋自己嘅無明同佢哋愚痴。首先佢做呢個行為咧係唔可以帶有任何嘅親恨心，同埋對自己亦都係要誠實。
So basically, the higher vow is more important than the lower vows. When you follow the higher vows you have to do something that breaks a lower precept, then or that seems to break, you have not actually broken the lower precept. But sometimes people might see you and they might think that you have and lose faith. And so you have to be careful. It's not as much of a problem for lay people. For monks, it is more of a problem. And so sometimes you might have to actually give back your vows before taking the action that would otherwise break them.
我哋要明白，首先係高層次嘅戒咧，永遠都係比呢個低層次嘅戒咧係更為重要嘅。咁其實首先我哋明白，我哋唔係真真正正咧係去破咗呢一條戒。其實咧，第一我哋係首先唔可以冇咗信心先，同埋呢啲戒咧係唔係俾在家人守嘅，係俾出家人守嘅。好多時我哋要去抉擇應唔應該去做咧，首先我哋係可以卸咗啲戒，然後先至去做。
And then the last part about keeping all the vows together is that the qualities of the higher vows apply. So when you act and you fulfill when you are in a conflict between the vows, if you follow the higher vow and end up breaking a lower vow, actually you still have all the qualities of the higher vow. As with the example, you have all the benefits of the higher vow. The example of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva killing the evil man who was going to sink the boat, he actually had a great source of merit because he was keeping his higher Bodhisattva vow.
當我哋遇到呢啲問題咧，永遠都係高層次嘅戒咧係重要過低層次嘅戒。又講翻頭先個例子，就係話嗰個船長就殺咗嗰個壞人。咁喺呢個情況之下咧，呢個船長咧係唔單止咧係冇犯到戒，而且係仲有功德。
So really when we practice the vows, we're doing the practices for our whole lives. And it's important that we practice them. You're lay people, you're in Hong Kong, you have families, you have jobs, you have responsibilities, things that you have to do. It's important that you try to keep the vows and do your practice in a way that fits in this life that you live here, that you live in here.
首先我哋明白呢啲戒咧係終身嘅，咁我哋亦都係有家庭有工作，同埋我哋要明白咧，究竟我哋受呢啲戒咧係咪適合咧？
And so I think what's important is to try to always keep a little going. You might have taken a Chenrezig empowerment and then the Guru says to you, now recite 1,000,000 Chenrezig mantras. If this happens, at first you think 1,000,000 is a big number, which it is, although with Chenrezig mantras they go pretty quick. But what you do is you just think, okay, I do a little bit every day, and you try to keep it continuous every single day. I'm going to do a few mantras every day. I'm going to do 300 mantras. I'm going to do 1,000 mantras. If you do 3,000 Chenrezig mantras a day, then you will finish 1,000,000 in less than 1 year.
咁當我哋接受咗呢啲戒咧，我哋就要遵守。例如我哋接受咗呢個四臂觀音嘅灌頂，我哋係念100萬遍呢個六字大明咒嘅。咁好多時候話100萬呢，亦都係一個好大嘅數目。咁我哋可以一日做啲，一日做啲少咁做，可能係一日做念300啊、1000啊，甚至乎3000。如果我哋可以一日念到3000咧，呢100萬咧就好快就會完成。
But what you have to do when you keep any of these, when you do your practice, you have to remember what is most important. What is the most important thing? And people around you will say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do many things. People will say, oh, you shouldn't do your practice now, you should go out, you should come out to dinner with me. Your mother will say, you have to come over for supper tonight, and things like this. And so there are responsibilities that we have to have, but you have to remember what is it that is most important.
首先我哋咧就要明白究竟乜嘢先係最重要咧？例如有好多人同你講話，你應該做呢樣做嗰樣，或者你今晚應該同我食飯，或者你阿媽叫你翻去食飯。好多時候咧，我哋好多呢啲咁嘅世俗活動，但係我哋亦都要去衡量究竟邊樣係最重要咧。
It is important, of course, when you're living in a society, you're part of the society. It's good to participate. Take care of your parents. Fulfill your job responsibilities. Take care of your children. Take care of your families. That's all important. But always remember that you have to keep your practice going, your meditation practice, your Buddhist practice going as much as you can.
咁首先乜嘢係最重要咧？就係話我哋喺呢個社會裏邊，當然我哋有我哋嘅家庭要照顧啊，有我哋嘅工作要去做啊，同埋有好多日常嘅俗務要去做。咁但係最重要都係話我哋時常都要記住修持佛法咧係最重要嘅。
And so you have to always try to do something. Different people have different things that they can do. There are some people who can get up at 4 in the morning, do 3 hours of meditation practice, and then go to work and work from 9 to 5, and then come home and do 2 hours more of meditation practice. There are not that many who can do that. There are a lot of people who can do a little bit of the time in the morning, maybe a bit in the evening. So try to do something that can fit in with your life and your lifestyle and your own inclinations.
咁我哋亦成日都要去做啲嘢。咁有啲人呢，係基本上呢，係可以朝頭早4點鐘起身，跟住呢去禪修3個鐘，跟住就返工，由9至5一路返，落咗班之後呢，又去做呢個禪修2個鐘。但係唔係好多人係可以咁做。但係最重要就係話我哋每一日都係要做啲嘢。
Some people are unable to meditate.
咁有啲人呢係冇辦法禪修。
And so they're often very good workers. And you should rejoice if they are good workers.
咁嗰啲唔可以禪修嗰啲人，通常都係有啲好努力工作。
This is a sign of commitment to the Dharma. It's a way of fulfilling your commitments to the Dharma and the Lama.
因為呢個呢係對佛法嘅一種承諾。
And so that's a good way to do it. Now we are getting a little bit on in the time, so we will next do the vows.
咁基本上今日嘅佛法開始到此為止，而家上師就會傳戒。
So now there are several people who want to take some or all of the 5 lay precepts now. But first, is there anyone who wants to take the precepts who has not yet taken the refuge vow? Or is there anyone else who would like to take the refuge vow now? If so, please come to the front.
咁有冇人係想受5戒而係未受皈依戒嘅？
Yeah, 皈依戒. So if you have the Dharma name, then you're okay. If you have not yet taken a refuge vow and been given a Dharma name and had your hair cut, then please come forward if you're going to take the vows.
咁有冇人係未受皈依戒而係冇一個法名？
And if not?
即係全部都皈依晒㗎啦，想受戒嗰啲。
So if everyone here who wants to take the lay precepts has already taken the refuge vow, then please, for the lay precepts, please come forward and stand in the front. Just stand in a couple lines in the front. Now, when you take the lay precepts, you can take any number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Some of you want to take 1, some of you want to take 5. So now think to yourself, and throughout this ceremony, which ones you want to take, and keep this in mind.
咁首先就話5戒係可以由1條到5條裏邊，你可以受1條至到5條，全部受晒。咁首先你哋要諗清楚自己係咪可以受持到呢啲戒，然後先至好受。
Okay, so the first thing to do is please prostrate 3 times to the Buddha.
咁喺佛前係3敬禮。
Yep. 2, 3. Now prostrate 3 times to the Master.
跟住向上師3敬禮。
Yep. 2, 3. Now please kneel with your right knee on the ground, your left knee raised, and your 2 hands joined at your heart in prayer position.
右膝着地，雙手合掌。
And now we will recite the text of the vow. The meaning of the vow is, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the best among all beings. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the supreme freedom from attachment. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the greatest of communities. Please accept me from now until the end of this life as an upasaka, someone who has the lay precepts.
首先呢，要跟上師念誦就係話，第一就係皈依佛兩足尊，皈依法離欲尊，皈依僧眾中尊。咁而嗰個戒呢係直至到呢你哋嘅生命終結為止。
And so thinking this now, please recite these words.
跟上師念誦。
Tsumba, Gongsu, So, Kangni, Namgi, Cho, Sanje, La, Kyapsum, Chio, Ducha Dang, Dalwa, Namgi, Cho, Chula, Kyapsum, Chio, So, Namgi, Cho, Gendunla, Kyapsum, Chio, Da, Du, Dine, Sungte, Jisit, Tsoi, Bardo, Genyendo, Tsunbe, Songdo, So. That was the first repetition. Now we will recite it the second time, please, again with the same motivation.
頭先你係念咗一次，跟住念第2次，大家都要有同一個動機。
Tsunbe, Gongsu, So, Da, Du, Dine, Songde, Jisit, Tsoi, Bardo, Gangni, Namgi, Cho, Sangela, Kyapsum, Chio, Ducha Dang, Dalwa, Namgi, Cho, Chula, Kyapsum, Chio, So, namgi, cho, gendun la, kyapsum, chio, da, du, dine, songte, jisi, tsoi, bardo, genyendo, tsunbe, songdo, so. That is the second repetition.
頭先係第二次嘅念誦。
Now on the third repetition, at the end of the third repetition, I will snap my fingers. The reason for me to snap my fingers is because when you are taking a vow, the way you receive the vow is by thinking, now I have taken the vow.
咁跟住咧就要跟上司念誦第三次。咁喺第三次咧，上司就會彈指，即係彈一下手指，咁就係話確切認定你哋係得到呢啲戒。
So if we were taking an empowerment, there would be a vase placed on your head and something that you would say, now I need to think I have taken the empowerment. But with a vow, there is nothing like that.
咁如果喺灌頂嘅儀式裏邊咧，通常就會擺個寶瓶喺你頭頂上邊，咁就話確切認定你得到呢個灌頂。咁但係受戒咧係冇嘅，所以就要用彈指。
And so for that reason, when I snap my fingers, think to yourself that now I have taken the lay precepts.
當上司一彈指嘅時候咧，你就要同自己講嗱，我而家得到呢個戒啦。
And we will now please repeat. Lopen, gongsu, sol, da, du, dine, songte, jisi, tsoi, bardo, gangi, namgi, cho, Sangela, kyapsum, chio, dujatang, dalwa, namgi, cho, churla, kyapsum, chio, tso, namgi, cho, gendunla, kyapsum, chio, da, du, dine, songte, jisi, tsoi, bardo, genyendo, lopenyi, Songdo so. So now I will say tap yeno, which means this is the method. And in response, you should say lexo, which means this very well.
當上司跟住會講 tap 就偏我哋就要講 lexo。
The reason for saying this is that the method to achieve liberation and omniscience is to take the vows and to keep them. So I'm saying this is the method, and you are saying very well, this is good.
只不過係一個方法，就係話我得到戒啦，咁然後你係話我願意接受。
So response saying lexo. Okay. Tapyeno. Now you have taken the vows. You now have the lay precepts. This is wonderful. It is especially auspicious to have done this on this evening. But now that you have done them, you need to think about the precepts and remember the precepts that you're doing. So you are all taking different numbers of precepts, some 1, some 3, some 5. So I will recite the text for all of the precepts, but as you recite this text, think to yourself that just as the arhats of the past have given up these actions of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and alcohol, and so forth, I too am giving up killing, stealing, lying, alcohol, and so forth, just as the arhats of the past did. And so that is the meaning of this text. And so thinking to yourself that you are going to keep the vows that you are intending to keep, please recite these words after me. And actually, sit comfortably.
咁跟住上司咧就會念誦，咁跟住咧你哋亦都跟佢念。念誦咧就係話好似過去嘅阿羅漢咁，咁佢哋亦都係遵守呢個五戒，係不殺生、不偷盜、不邪淫、不妄語同埋不飲酒。咁你喺個心裏邊，當佢念嘅時候，你自己個心係想受邊條戒，你就自己同自己講。
Please repeat. Flopen, gongso, sol, jitar, ngunyi, pakpa, drachomba, dedaki, jisi, tsoi, bardo, sokcheba, pangte, sokcheba, le, lar lokpa, dejendo, da ming. Say your names. She Giwe, Kyang, Du, Dine, Songte, Jisi, Tsoi, 바르도 속주바 빵데 속주바레 라르 로파르 기요 예나 탐보 디 다 팍바 자총바 데다기 플라팔라 제수 플라포 제수 트루포 제수 지도 셴양 무인기 팍바 자총바 데다기 제시 소이 바르도 마짐바르 렘파당 드페 로프리엠파 당 준드 마와당 주이창당 주페창 니프르규르와 빠메베 네 방데 주이창당 주페창 니프르규르와 빠메바 네레 플라르 로파 데신도 다맹. Say your names. Du, Dine, Sungde, Jisi, Tsoi, Bardo, Majimbar, Lempatang, Dupe, Lopar, Yempatang, Zundu, Mawadang, Drui, Changdang, Jupe Chang, Nipur Yurwa, Pamepe Ne, Le, Lar, Lopar, Gio, Yena, Ngapa, Di, Da, Papa, Drachomba, Dedaki, Flapala, Jesu, Lopo, Jesu, Drupo, Jesu, Gido, Detar, Kyugi. Oh, excuse me. That completes that. So you have now completed the vows. You have taken the vows of the lay precepts now on this auspicious day of Sagadawa. Now that you've taken the vows, please keep the vows to the best of your abilities. Do everything to keep them. The vows are extremely important. They are the cause for you in the future to achieve liberation for yourself, liberation for all sentient beings. And so I ask you to please keep the vows as well as you can.
你哋今日已經接受咗皈依戒，係呢個好特殊嘅日子，因為今日你係月食，受咗戒之後咧，你哋係要好好去遵守呢啲戒，因為呢啲戒日咧最終會帶俾你哋解脫同埋好多眾生嘅解脫。
So now that you have taken the vows, I will make the auspicious prayer that you may keep the vows, that you may have strong discipline, that you will keep the discipline from now on in this lifetime, and that in the future you will achieve enlightenment. And so please keep this same aspiration in mind as I recite this aspiration.
咁跟住咧，上師就會念誦一段經文，咁咧你要同自己講話。我從今開始咧，就係要受持呢個五戒，直至到自己從輪迴解脫出嚟，同埋將來會成就呢個佛果。
So now please stand up. O tarbe jatsen tempora yoje, tsambara chepe tse tar chimbar yoje, tsurimgi pumbo yonzo zopra yojik, tsera tamju tu tambe che nyamsu lembe kalparan tembra yoje, tarbe jatsen tempora yojik, tsambara chepe tse tar chimbar yoje, tsurimgi pumbo yonzo zopra yojik, tsera tamju tu tambe che nyamsu lembe kalpadan dembra jurje tambe yatsen dembra jurje tsambara chepe tse tar chimbar jurje tsurimgi pumbo yonzo zopra jurje tsera tamje tu tambe che nyamsu lembe kalpadan dembra jurje with conduct of flawless discipline, discipline that's completely pure, discipline free of arrogance, may I perfect transcendent discipline. Following all the victors, may we train and bring excellent conduct to perfection. May we act with pure, stainless discipline that never lapses and is free of faults. So thank you very much.
多謝大家。
One of the greatest virtues is to rejoice. And so I think all of us here should rejoice in these people who have done a great virtue on this Sagadawa.
大家應該係要生個歡喜心，有人受持呢個五戒。
And I think we've got a little bit more time, so let's take 2 or 3 questions.
有冇人有問題？ Okay, there's a questions about lying, 5 precepts of lying. He understands the importance of this particular vow. But in daily lives, when we are dealing with all kinds of people, and sometimes we want to make the atmosphere more comfortable, and sometimes we might say something that are lies, but not hurting others. Or sometimes some language is not proper language. Does that mean we have a downfall? If this is a downfall, then it is very important. It is very difficult to keep this vow.
Yes, this is lying is one of the more difficult of the vows to actually keep if you want to be very strict about it. How are you doing? I'm fine. Actually, I'm in terrible pain. I just had an operation and I'm in complete pain. But you say, oh, I'm fine.
有時講大話就係話，例如人哋話你而家點啊？今日好唔好啊？咁你話我好好，其實咧你係好辛苦，你啱啱做完個手術，其實你係好痛好辛苦。咁究竟呢個係咪大話咧？
This is one area where sometimes the Bodhisattva vow and the individual liberation vows slightly conflict. It is important to get along. Often, instead of telling a lie, there is a way you can say something non-committal that doesn't tell a lie. It doesn't harm the situation. It helps people. And so you just have to use your intelligence at the point that it comes to say something. So you just have to think about it. Often there's a way that you can say something that doesn't harm anyone, that doesn't harm the atmosphere, and yet also does not tell a lie.
咁有時其實喺菩薩戒同埋別解脫戒咧係會有少少衝突。咁其實最主要就係話你講呢樣嘢嘅動機同埋你係有冇傷害到人。咁其實喺某啲情況下，唔同氣氛、唔同嘅人我哋係有時少不免係會講咗一啲妄語。好多時候就係話應該用自己嘅智慧去衡量。如果你係冇出自一個唔好嘅動機同埋冇傷害到人咧，咁係唔算犯嘅。
For example, if someone is dying and they're afraid of what's happening as they're dying, and you're sitting by their bed trying to comfort them, they're saying, what's going to happen? Am I going to die? You can't say, no, you're going to die. You can't say that. But what you can say is, don't worry, it's going to be all right.
咁例如一個例子就係話有一個人臨終就嚟死啦，咁其實佢自己亦都知道自己就嚟死，咁就佢會問你，佢話我而家係咪要死咧？咁其實好多時就係話你唔想講個真相俾佢聽，你話你唔會，或者話你唔好咁擔心啦，冇咩事嘅。咁其實你係令呢個人舒服咗。其實表面上係講咗個大話，但係實質上你係安撫咗佢。Okay, sometimes when friends are gathering and they may make jokes and sometimes involved in some obscene topics, like men and women having sex and things like that. Does that mean he has a downfall on the sexual misconduct?
You haven't done anything. It's the friends who are telling the jokes.
如果係朋友講呢啲嘢，就唔代表犯戒。
That's that clear? Did everyone get the question?
我頭先嗰兩個問題。佢話喺日常即係我哋開玩笑嘅時候係講咗有啲關於啲色情嘅題目，例如係男女之間嘅問題，咁會唔會涉及犯戒咧？咁上司就話，如果大家係朋友當講笑咧，就唔算係犯呢個邪淫戒。
This is an important point. When you're keeping vows, you are keeping your own vows. You are not worrying about other people's behavior. You're worrying about your own behavior. Right? That's what you can control. You can't control what anyone else comes on and says. And so you can only be mindful, aware, and careful about what's going on in your own mind and your own actions.
最主要咧就係話呢啲戒咧係你自己要遵守嘅，就唔係你身邊嘅人或者你朋友要遵守嘅。咁好多時候喺呢啲環境咧就係話我哋要小心，時常保持一個覺心，知道自己嘅言行舉止喺度做緊乜嘢。
Okay, so I think maybe one more question.
想問上司咧，就係上個星期六佢講話創古寧波車起咗間女性嘅廟，我想問嗰啲係咩廟，係要咩條件先可以去得嘅咧
？Okay, last Saturday you talk about the Chongku Rinpoche is building a nunnery. He said, what kind of a nunnery is that, and under what conditions they will accept people as a nun? 係咪話即係如果你想入去間廟度出家，有咩條件？係咪咁嘅意思啊？你講係點樣去，定係你想出家去呢間廟啊？ He said, first of all, what kind of a nunnery is that, and how can she get there?
How can she get there? Okay. The nunnery is in area of near Kathmandu called Swayambhunath. It's near a very sacred site in Nepal. It's a beautiful nunnery, a beautiful new temple. They've got 300 nuns. They have full educational opportunities and all the practice opportunities, the same for the nuns as for the monks. They have a philosophical college. They have everything. They have a retreat center. So it's a very good nunnery. The nuns there are well treated and receive a very good education.
其實呢間咁嘅女嚟嘅廟咧，就喺尼泊爾 in Nepal 喺尼泊爾叫做 Swayambhunath 嘅地方。咁呢個係一個好非常之靚、好漂亮嘅地方。咁裏邊大約而家係大約有300個女尼喺度住緊。基本上咧，佢哋係同一般佛教嘅寺廟係冇乜分別嘅。咁裏邊亦都有佛學院啊，同埋各方面，同埋佢哋修持嘅亦都係同男性嘅寺廟咧都係一樣。
In terms of, in general, getting into the monastery, there is a stick. And if you're tall enough to get over to, if you're taller than the stick, then the girl is generally old enough to be admitted into the nunnery. But you also need to have Rinpoche's permission. So provided I think you're taller than the stick, but getting Rinpoche's permission is the difficult thing. But you'd also want to be careful. A lot of people have the wish to become a nun or a monk, and you have to make sure that it's really something you can sustain. So I think the best thing to do is to maybe go to Kathmandu and visit the nunnery and see if you can maybe spend some time there. It's difficult to find rooms there because they're very crowded. But if you can stay there and see what it's like and see if it's a place that fits with you, then you can maybe think about asking Rinpoche if you can become a nun and stay there.
佢哋有一支竹，首先你要高過嗰支竹咧，係先至可以入去嗰間寺廟度出家。咁即係話你係一個成年人。咁首先就話，如果你真係想去嘅咧，首先你要得到創古力波車嘅允許，咁呢樣亦都係一樣有難度嘅事。咁如果你真係想可以出家成為一個女尼咧，佢話你最好咧就先去嗰度睇清楚當地嘅環境。咁我話，因為咧出咗家之後咧就唔同在家，你要諗清楚你自己可唔可以接受嗰種生活。同埋嗰度咧已經係好逼，唔夠房用，所以咧你自己最好去嗰度睇清楚，認為適唔適合你，然後先至再去問創古力波車。
So thank you all very much.
好多謝大家。